The words that unmade my world weren't shouted in anger or whispered in betrayal. They were delivered in the sterile, beige quiet of a cardiologist's office, under the fluorescent hum of lights that seemed to bleach all color from life. Dilated cardiomyopathy, doctor. Evans said the words with a practiced, gentle finality, his eyes offering a sympathy I wasn't ready to accept. My heart, he explained, was weakening, stretching like old elastic. It was failing. 5 years, maybe less. I remember nodding, my hands folded neatly in my lap, the very picture of a placid, 31-year-old woman absorbing difficult news. But inside, a strange and terrible flower was blooming. It wasn't fear, not then. It was a dark, exhilarating sense of permission. For years, I had felt like a ghost in my own life, a silent curator of a home that wasn't truly mine, a wife to a man I understood less than the changing seasons, a mother to a child whose boundless energy only highlighted my own inertia. My husband, Garrett, was a good man. Everyone said so. He was steady, reliable, a rock. He worked in construction, leaving before the sun rose and returning after it had set, trailing the scent of sawdust and exhaustion. He would grunt a greeting, his eyes already locked on his phone, scroll through a litany of other people's lives, eat the dinner I'd prepared, and be asleep on the couch by 9, the drone of a sports recap show filling the silence he left behind. He paid the bills. He didn't cheat. He didn't raise his voice. By all metrics of a stable marriage, he was a success. But God, the silence was deafening. Our conversations were transactional checklists about groceries and bills and whether our son Silas needed new shoes. The house itself was a monument to our shared apathy: beige walls, beige carpets, beige furniture. It was a life painted in shades of taupe. I was drowning in it, and the diagnosis, as terrifying as it was, felt like a hand reaching through the surface, offering not a lifeline, but an escape. My part-time job at a boutique was meant to be my own small rebellion against the beige. It was there I met Serafina. Where the other women gossiped about reality television, or traded complaints about their husbands, Sarah, as she insisted I call her, talked about poetry and art and places she'd been that sounded like they were from a different, more vibrant planet. She was a splash of crimson in my monochrome world. She had a laugh that made you want to laugh with her, a way of touching my arm when she made a point that sent a jolt through my system, a feeling I hadn't realized I'd been missing. She saw me, not as Garrett's wife or Silas's mother, but as Alara. She'd ask about the book I was reading, not just if it was good, but what I thought about the author's use of metaphor. She sent me memes after work that were so specific to our shared sense of humor, it felt like she was reading my mind. While Garrett was at home researching heart-healthy diets for cardiomyopathy, turning my death sentence into another one of his manageable projects, Serafina was the one who saw the terror in my eyes. She didn't want to fix it. She wanted to sit with me in the darkness of it. She understood that I wasn't just afraid of dying. I was petrified of dying without ever having truly lived. This beige, suffocating, predictable life, was this really all I was going to get? The thought was more terrifying than the diagnosis itself. Garrett tried. I have to give him that. He created spreadsheets, one for my medications, one for doctor's appointments, another for low-sodium recipes he found online. He treated my failing heart like a leaky faucet that could be fixed with the right tools and enough diligence. He would sit beside me on the couch, his laptop glowing, and say things like, "Honey, I found a clinical trial in Ohio. The success rates are promising." He was trying to manage my death, to schedule it into submission. It only made me feel more profoundly alone. His concern was practical, not passionate. He was mourning the disruption to our routine, not the impending loss of his wife. Serafina was the opposite. She never mentioned treatments or mortality rates. Instead, she asked, "How do you feel right now?" She listened as I confessed my ugliest thoughts, my anger at the universe, my resentment of healthy people, the suffocating feeling that my life had been a series of compromises I never consciously made. Our after-work talks bled from the store's break room into long walks in the parking lot, then to aimless drives with the windows down, the radio playing songs that felt like the soundtrack to a new life. The texts became more frequent, more intimate, stretching late into the night long after Garrett's snores had become the house's only rhythm. The night it all changed, Serafina suggested dinner. "Somewhere different," she'd said. our spot. I agreed without a moment's hesitation, texting Garrett a lie about a mandatory inventory meeting. The guilt was a faint, distant hum, easily drowned out by the thrum of anticipation. We went to a small Italian place in a neighborhood I'd never been to, a cozy corner of the world where no one knew me. For 3 hours, I wasn't a dying woman or a responsible mother. I was just Alara, a woman sitting across from another woman who hung on my every word, whose eyes sparkled with an intensity that made me feel like the most fascinating person on earth. The conversation flowed like expensive wine, easy and intoxicating. We talked about everything and nothing. When she reached across the table and took my hand, her thumb stroking my knuckles, she said, "I care about you so much, Ilara." Something inside me, a lock I didn't even know was there, clicked open. This wasn't a crisis-induced fling. It felt like waking up. It felt like understanding, for the first time, what all those poems and love songs were about. Garrett and I had never had this. We had convenience, compatibility, a shared history. With Serafina, I felt an electric current, a force of nature. In her car after dinner, when she leaned over and kissed me, it wasn't an experiment, it was a confirmation. It was like finding a part of my soul I had been searching for my entire life, without even knowing it was missing. The breaking point with Garrett came a week later. He sat me down, his expression earnest and serious. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice full of a sincerity that made my skin crawl. "I know the timing isn't ideal with your health, but I think we should have another baby. I think Silas would love a little brother or sister." I stared at him, speechless. My body was actively betraying me. My heart was slowly giving up, and I was falling deeply, irrevocably in love with someone else, and he wanted to bring another child into this wreckage. He saw my terminal illness as an inconvenient timing, a logistical hurdle to overcome on the way to the next phase of his 5-year plan. It was the final, devastating proof that he had no idea who I was. That night, after he fell asleep on the couch, I made my choice. I wrote a short, cowardly note. I didn't try to explain the chasm between us, just that I had met someone who made me feel alive, and that I needed to take this chance while I still had time. I packed a single suitcase, my hands shaking not with regret, but with a terrifying, liberating resolve. I left the note on the kitchen counter, next to the coffee maker. I allowed myself one last look at Silas, sleeping peacefully in his bed, a soft, innocent form in the dim glow of his nightlight. He's young, I told myself. He'll adapt. It's better for him to have one happy parent than two who are just ghosts in a house. Serafina was waiting for me. When I walked into her apartment, suitcase in hand, she enveloped me in a hug that felt like coming home. "Are you ready for this?" she whispered into my hair. And God, I was. I was choosing myself. I was choosing love. I was choosing to live. The first few months with Serafina were a dizzying, sun-drenched dream. We found a studio apartment downtown with high ceilings and a big window that looked out over the city. After years in the beige suburbs, the constant thrum of urban life felt like a heartbeat, mirroring the new, frantic rhythm in my own chest. Waking up next to someone who immediately rolled over to kiss me, who wanted to hear about my dreams, felt like a miracle. Life became a series of spontaneous adventures. A random Tuesday could turn into a drive to the coast. A quiet evening could become a late-night exploration of a new restaurant. The rigid, unforgiving schedule of nap times and work commitments that had defined my existence was gone. This was freedom, and it was intoxicating. Serafina's friends were artists, writers, musicians, people who debated philosophy until 3 in the morning, fueled by cheap wine and passion. They talked about ideas and experiences, not mortgages and property taxes. They looked at me with interest, not pity. When I was with them, with her, my diagnosis felt less like a death sentence and more like a backdrop to a beautiful, urgent story. Sarah was incredible. She researched alternative therapies and holistic approaches to my condition, not with Garrett's panicked, spreadsheet-driven desperation, but with the collaborative spirit of a true partner. "We're a team," she'd say, squeezing my hand. "We'll face this together." On my bad days, when my breath was short and my energy was gone, she never made me feel like a burden. She'd order takeout, build a fort of pillows on the couch, and we'd binge-watch old movies. Guilt was a visitor that came only in the dead of night. I'd see a little boy with blonde hair like Silas's on the street, and feel a sharp, physical ache. I told myself it was temporary. Once Sarah and I were settled, I'd figure out visitation. I'd be a better, happier mother to him from a distance. Garrett called a few times in those first weeks. I let every call go to voicemail. I couldn't face his anger, his confusion, his inevitable lectures about responsibility. On Serafina's advice, I blocked his number. "You don't owe him an explanation, Alara," she said, her voice firm. "You gave him years of your life. You gave him a son. You've paid your dues." I believed her. The only real stress was money. My part-time salary barely made a dent in our expenses, and my medical bills were piling up. But Serafina, with her well-paying office job, waved it all away. "It's just money," she'd laugh. "We're investing in us, in our future." But around the 4th month, the dream began to fray at the edges. The changes were subtle at first. Serafina started working later, citing new projects and looming deadlines. When she came home, the vibrant focus she used to lavish on me was replaced by a distracted haze, her attention tethered to the glowing screen of her phone. She'd angle it away from me when she texted, a gesture so small yet so significant. Then the name started to appear. Sloane. A new colleague, apparently. "Sloane is hilarious," she'd say. "You wouldn't believe the joke she told today." Or, "Sloane and I are swamped on this project." When I suggested she invite Sloane out with us, wanting to meet this person who was consuming so much of my partner's time and energy, Serafina would brush it off. "Nah, let's keep work and home separate." The irony was a bitter pill I was forced to swallow. I had left a man I found controlling, only to find myself feeling the same cold anxiety creeping into my new perfect life. Just as the cracks in my relationship began to show, the fissures in my own body widened into chasms. My health took a sharp, undeniable downturn. The episodes of breathlessness became more frequent, the chest pains more severe. The first couple of times I had to go to the emergency room, Serafina was a whirlwind of concerned efficiency, dropping everything to be by my side, holding my hand, her face a mask of worry. But as the visits became more common, her presence became less certain. Unmovable work commitments would suddenly materialize. An important meeting she just couldn't miss. A deadline that had to be met. The worst episode happened on a Tuesday. I was trying to make pasta, a simple task that suddenly felt like climbing a mountain. My vision tunneled, my lungs refused to inflate, and a crushing weight settled on my chest. I collapsed to the floor, my phone skittering across the linoleum. Sobbing, terrified, I managed to call her. "Sarah, please," I gasped. "Something's wrong. I need you to come home." Emmy. There was a pause on the other end, and then a sound that shattered me more than the pain in my chest. A sigh. An audible, impatient sigh. "Alara, I'm in the middle of a major presentation," she said, her voice strained with annoyance. "I'll try to leave as soon as I can." I ended up calling an ambulance for myself. I spent 6 hours in the ER, a lonely island in a sea of sterile white. Nurses and doctors came and went, drawing blood, running tests, their faces a professional blend of concern and detachment. I was completely, utterly alone. Serafina finally arrived close to midnight. She didn't rush to my bedside. She stood at the foot of the bed, her coat still on, checking her watch as if she had somewhere better to be. When the doctor came back to deliver the news, his face was grim. The cardiomyopathy was progressing much faster than anticipated. The 5-year estimate was optimistic. I was now looking at months, not years. I braced myself for Serafina's grief, for her to break down, to hold me. Instead, she just looked inconvenienced. The news landed not as a tragedy, but as a complication to her schedule. The drive home was silent and cold. Back in the apartment that no longer felt like a home, I finally confronted her. "Who is Sloane?" I asked, my voice shaking. Her reaction was a tidal wave of defensiveness. She accused me of being paranoid, of being controlling. And then, the killing blow. "You know, just because you cheated on your husband, Alara, doesn't mean everyone is a cheater." The words struck me with physical force. She had taken my most vulnerable act, the desperate, life-altering choice I had made for her, and turned it into a weapon to use against me. The final, ugly confrontation came a few nights later. I was feeling particularly weak and frightened. Serafina came home late, smelling of wine and a perfume that wasn't hers. She was irritated to find me awake. We need to talk, I said, my voice barely a whisper. About Sloane. And then the truth came out, not in a torrent, but in a cold, matter-of-fact drip. They'd been seeing each other for months. Sloane was healthy, vibrant, and unburdened by a ticking clock. I do love you, Alara, Serafina claimed, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. But I can't do this. I can't be a nursemaid. I'm too young to tie my life to someone who's dying. I have to think about my own happiness, my own future. I gave up everything for you, I screamed, the sound raw and broken. My marriage, my son. I trusted you with my heart when I knew it was literally broken. I'm sorry, she said, over and over. The words empty and meaningless. I just have to think of myself. She was moving in with Sloane the following week. I had 30 days to find somewhere else to live. Just like that, it was over. The grand, cinematic love story I had banked my entire life on was cancelled. I was left alone in an empty apartment, with nothing but a suitcase, a broken body, and a terminal diagnosis. There is a particular kind of silence that fills a home after it has been emptied of love. It's a heavy, suffocating silence, thick with the ghosts of laughter and broken promises. For 2 weeks, I sat in that silence, watching my world shrink to the 4 walls of the downtown apartment. My savings were gone. My health was a wreck. My parents, who lived across the country, had barely spoken to me since I'd left Garrett. I had burned every bridge to build a new life on an island that had just sunk into the sea. There was only one place to go. The drive back to the suburbs was the longest journey of my life. Every mile was a measure of my failure. The pristine lawns and cookie-cutter houses I had once scorned now looked like unattainable sanctuaries. I rehearsed what I would say 100 times, but when I finally stood on the familiar porch of the home that used to be mine, all the words evaporated. Garrett opened the door. He looked different. The weary slump in his shoulders was gone, replaced by a straight-backed confidence. The exhaustion in his eyes had cleared. He didn't yell. He didn't gloat. He just looked at me, standing there with my pathetic suitcase, and a deep, profound tiredness settled on his face. Then, a small figure peeked around his legs. It was Silas. He was almost 6 now, his face leaner, his hair longer. He looked so much older. He stared at me not with recognition, but with the cautious curiosity a child reserves for a stranger. "Daddy, who is that?" he whispered. The words didn't just break my heart, they atomized it. They were the 3 most devastating words I had ever heard. This is Mommy, buddy," Garrett said, his voice gentle but strained. "Remember? We looked at the pictures. Pictures. My son knew me from photographs because I had been gone so long he had forgotten my face. I tried to explain everything: the breakup, my worsening health, having nowhere to go. Garrett listened with an unreadable expression. When I was finished, he just sighed, a sound completely different from Serafina's sigh of impatience. This one was heavy with the weight of years of disappointment. "You can sleep on the couch," he said finally, his voice flat, "until you figure something out. But that's all this is, Alara. I'm not your husband anymore. We're not a family. I'm doing this for Silas." Living in that house was a unique and exquisitely painful form of torment. It was a living museum of the life I had willfully destroyed. I watched as Garrett, the man I had dismissed as boring and checked out, moved through his life with a competence and joy I had never seen. He had learned to braid hair, something I had always struggled with. He packed creative lunches for Silas with notes tucked inside. He handled the bedtime routine of stories and teeth brushing with a practiced ease. In those first few weeks, Silas barely acknowledged me. He was polite, the way a child is taught to be with adults he doesn't know well. When he needed something, a glass of water, help with a toy, he went to his father. I was a guest, an intruder in the sacred space between a father and his son. And then, there was Clara. She was a nurse. Garrett had met in a support group for single parents. Of course she was a nurse. Nurturing, practical, everything I wasn't. She was pretty in a natural, understated way, with a kind smile that reached her eyes. But the thing that truly gutted me was watching her with Silas. She didn't try too hard, didn't put on a performance. She just talked to him like he was a person. She listened, really listened, to his long, rambling stories about school. One afternoon, I watched from the couch as she sat with him at the kitchen table, patiently helping him with a math problem, laughing at his jokes. This was supposed to be my role. This was the relationship I was supposed to have with my son. I had given it up, and someone else was now filling that space and doing it better than I ever had. I had to turn away and pretend to be engrossed in the silent television, the tears burning behind my eyes. My life on the couch became a blur of daytime television, medication schedules, and the quiet observation of a family healing around the wound I had created. Garrett set firm boundaries. This wasn't a holiday. I had to contribute. The local hospital gave me a few hours a week answering phones, a pity job that barely covered the cost of my prescriptions. I was a ghost haunting my own past. Garrett would drive me to my medical appointments, a gesture of basic human decency, but he would wait in the car, scrolling on his phone, a universe away from the man who once made spreadsheets to try and save me. My body was a traitor, surrendering more ground each day. The doctors stopped talking about treatments and started talking about comfort care. I was dying, slowly and ungracefully, on the couch of the man I had betrayed. The final blow came on a quiet Thursday evening. I was pretending to be asleep, a common tactic to avoid the discomfort my presence caused. Garrett and Clara were in the kitchen, their voices a low murmur. They thought I couldn't hear. "I want to give him the stability he deserves, Clara," Garrett was saying. His voice had a warmth, an excitement I couldn't remember ever hearing when he spoke of a future with me. "He's been through enough upheaval. He needs to know that the people in his life aren't going anywhere." The implication was a blade twisting in my gut. I was the upheaval. I was the instability. I was the person who goes away. Clara was the one who stayed, the one who could be counted on, the one who put Silas's needs first. They started talking about their own future, getting a bigger place, maybe having another child, a sibling for Silas, a life they were building together, on the foundations of the one I had demolished. It was in that moment, listening to the man I'd left for being boring plan a vibrant future with another woman, that I finally understood. The cruelest irony of my impending death was this. It had given me the clarity to finally see what real love looked like. It wasn't the lightning strike, the intoxicating passion I had chased with Serafina. That was an illusion, a selfish fantasy that had evaporated the moment it became inconvenient. I had heard through a mutual acquaintance that Serafina and Sloane were engaged, planning a wedding. The woman who couldn't handle watching me deteriorate was thriving, building the life we had planned with someone newer, healthier. Real love was what Garrett was giving Clara and Silas. It was the patient, steady, reliable love I had dismissed as boring. It was the quiet strength of showing up, day after day. It was braiding your son's hair, helping with homework, and holding the hand of the woman you wanted to build a future with. It was the foundation of everything meaningful. I had traded something real and lasting for a cheap thrill. I had abandoned a man who would have cared for me through anything for a woman who abandoned me the moment I became a burden. I had left a son who loved me unconditionally for a relationship built on a lie. Now, as I live out my final months on this couch where I don't belong, my world has shrunk to the view from the living room window. I watch as Garrett teaches Silas to ride his bike on the lawn, his training wheels finally off. Clara is on the porch, cheering them on, her face alight with genuine joy. They are a perfect picture, a family, whole and happy. The most painful part isn't that I'm dying alone. It's that I can see, with piercing, unbearable clarity, how much happier everyone is without me. Garrett is a better father, Silas has the stability he needs, and Clara gets to love them both, untainted by the toxicity I brought to everything I touched. I didn't leave my family for love. I left them for selfishness. I made my choice, and this is the consequence. There is no one left to blame, no one left to fool, and nowhere left to run. This is what I deserve. And as I watch them laugh in the golden light of the setting sun, I know that we all know it.